Pattan's Pumpkin, an Indian flood story. Once upon a time there was a man called Pattan. He lived with his wife Kani on the banks of a mighty river that galloped down the Sayadri mountains. They tended the goats, fed the bulls, and rode with the elephants that roamed their lands. Pattan grew pepper, rice, nutmeg, and bananas. He shared his food with everyone, the animals, the birds, and the insects. One day, Pattan found an ailing plant in the valley. It had beautiful yellow flowers. "I'll plant it by my hut and look after it," he thought. The plant liked its new home. Its yellow flowers smiled at the sun. "Look," Pattan called one day, "a pumpkin has started to grow." The pumpkin grew a little every day. "The goats can't reach it now," said Canny. The pumpkin had grown taller than the fence. It was fatter than the pigs. It grew some more. Pattan had to climb on the elephants to check the pumpkin. And still it grew bigger and bigger and bigger. "Soon it will be as tall as the mountain," said Pattan. The next day dark clouds gathered. Rain crashed against the rocks in fury. Pattan was afraid that the floods would wash away his hut. "We should leave the mountains tomorrow," he said. "We should take all the animals, birds, beetles, and bugs with us, and a sapling of every plant and seeds of every grain." But how were they going to take all the creatures with them? Pattan couldn't sleep that night. When the pumpkin glowed like fire under a burst of lightning, he had an idea. In the morning, Pattan reached for his axe. "It's time to harvest the pumpkin," he said. Battling the lashing rain, Pattan climbed the mountain. The birds and animals followed him. Pattan jumped on top of the pumpkin. Cutting a big hole, he dived into its orange flesh. The birds called out in fear. The goats bleated, snorted. Pattan dug into the pumpkin, hollowing its insides. "Help me," he called. The goats, the bison, and the birds ferried out the pumpkin flesh as fast as they could. The wind blew hard, rocking the pumpkin from side to side. But Pattan did not give up. He dug and dug until the pumpkin was hollow. At last it was big enough for everyone. Down in the valley, Canny filled sacks with grain, seeds, and herbs. Pattan loaded them onto the goats, elephants, and bulls and brought them up the mountainside. "Hurry, climb in," Pattan cried. The dark evening skies cradled the mountain in darkness. "We must leave before nightfall," said Pattan, cutting the prickly stem from the plant. Now the pumpkin was free. It rolled down the mountain and bounced into the river. The crested waters of the river carried the pumpkin along. Many a day and night must have passed. No one counted. It rained and rained and rained. Canny sang a lullaby to soothe the baby animals and birds. While the gods of rain and thunder send us a storm, here inside the pumpkin we are safe and warm. One day we will return to our mountain peak, but in this great darkness, light is what we seek. And then, one day, the pumpkin bumped against something and stopped. Pattan climbed out into a bright and sunny day. "We've reached the plains," he called joyfully. Annie and all the creatures hurried out. The troubles of the rain were finally over. "The pumpkin has saved us," said Canny. The animals and birds basked in the sunshine. The next morning Pattan gathered everyone together. "It's time to return home," he said. Back in the valley they built a new house by the river. "I'm forever grateful to the pumpkin," Pattan said as he planted the single pumpkin seed he had saved. Pattan and Canny had many children, and they all made their homes in the foothills of the Sahyadri Mountains. Even today Pattan's descendants live in this valley, looking after their animals and growing pumpkins. They remember Pattan and Canny with reverence and love.